In the early 17th century, the seas were as treacherous as they were unexplored. Captain Samuel Blackwood and his crew of the Mariner's Wrath were seasoned sailors, accustomed to the perils of the ocean. But nothing could prepare them for the horrors that awaited them on an uncharted island. One fateful night, a violent storm forced them off course. The ship battled towering waves and howling winds for hours. Just as they thought the worst was over, a dark shape loomed ahead, a jagged, desolate island. "We have no choice," Samuel shouted over the roar of the storm. "We must anchor here." As they approached the shore, they saw the eerie sight of dozens of ruined and abandoned ships, their broken hulls jutting out of the sand like skeletal remains. Samuel's blood ran cold. This was no ordinary island, it was a sailor's graveyard. Dawn broke with an eerie silence. The storm had passed, leaving the island shrouded in an unnatural calm. The crew disembarked cautiously, their eyes scanning the shoreline for any signs of life. "Look at these ships," Jonas, Samuel's first mate, said in awe. "They've been here for decades, maybe centuries." As they explored the beach, they found remnants of pirate vessels, merchant ships, and warships, all in various stages of decay. It was as if the island had been collecting them for centuries. "We need to be careful," Samuel warned. "There's something wrong with this place." The crew set up camp near the shore, but unease settled over them. That night, strange sounds echoed from the island's interior, whispers, cries, and the distant clanging of metal. By morning, one of the crew members, Thomas, was missing. His belongings were left untouched, his footprints leading into the dense forest and vanishing abruptly. "We need to find him," Samuel said, though he felt a growing dread. "But we must stick together." The search party ventured into the forest, the trees closing in around them like a living entity. The air grew colder, and an oppressive darkness seemed to seep from the very ground. The deeper they went, the more the forest seemed to come alive. Shadows danced among the trees, and strange, ghostly figures appeared and disappeared at the edge of their vision. "Captain, this place is cursed," one of the sailors muttered, his voice trembling. "We need to leave." "We can't leave Thomas behind," Samuel replied, though he shared the sailor's fear. They pressed on, the forest growing darker and more menacing. Suddenly, a piercing scream shattered the silence. They rushed towards the sound, but when they arrived, there was no sign of Thomas, only his tattered shirt, stained with blood. The crew's morale plummeted. They returned to the camp, only to find more of their number missing. Panic set in as the realization dawned, they were being hunted. Desperate for answers, Samuel decided to explore the island's interior further. Jonas and a few others joined him, while the remaining crew fortified their camp. As they journeyed deeper, they came upon the ruins of an ancient civilization. Crumbling stone structures and eerie statues stood as silent sentinels, their eyes seeming to follow the sailors' every move. "What happened here?" Jonas wondered aloud, his voice echoing through the empty streets. As they explored the ruins, they heard a haunting melody drifting through the air. It was a beautiful yet sorrowful tune, played on an unseen instrument. Drawn by the sound, they followed it to a clearing where a ghostly figure stood, a beautiful lady, her translucent form shimmering in the moonlight. "Who are you?" Samuel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I am Ilara," she replied, her voice soft and melodic. "I was once a sailor like you, drawn to this island by a curse." "What curse?" Jonas asked, his eyes wide with fear. "A beast dwells here," Ilara explained. "A merman with the power to control the seas and lure ships to their doom. He devours the souls of those who come here, trapping them for eternity." Ilara led them to a cave hidden deep within the island. Inside, they found carvings and paintings depicting a monstrous creature, a merman with scales like armor and eyes that glowed with an unnatural light. "This is the beast," Ilara said. "He has 3 forms, each more dangerous than the last. To break the curse, you must defeat all 3. How do we find him?" Samuel asked. "He will find you," Ilara replied ominously. "But beware, his forms are deceptive. He can appear in different places at once, and each form has its own strengths and weaknesses." As night fell, the crew fortified their camp, preparing for the inevitable encounter with the beast. They didn't have to wait long. A low, rumbling growl echoed through the forest, and the ground began to shake. "He's coming," Ilara warned. Suddenly, the beast emerged from the shadows, a massive serpent with scales that shimmered in the moonlight. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light as it lunged at the sailors, its jaws snapping shut with a deafening crack. "Attack!" Samuel shouted, drawing his cutlass. The crew fought valiantly, but the serpent's scales were nearly impenetrable. It thrashed and coiled, its tail sweeping sailors off their feet. Samuel and Jonas moved with practiced precision, striking at the serpent's vulnerable spots. Despite their efforts, the serpent seemed invincible. But then, Samuel noticed a faint glow emanating from the serpent's chest, a small, pulsating light. "Jonas, aim for the glow," Samuel shouted. Jonas nodded, understanding immediately. They focused their attacks on the glowing spot, their weapons striking with precision and force. The serpent let out a deafening roar, its body convulsing in agony. With a final, desperate strike, Samuel drove his cutlass into the glowing spot. The serpent let out a deafening scream, its body disintegrating into a cloud of mist. "We did it," Jonas said, his voice filled with relief. "One form down," Ilara said. "Two more to go." Ilara led them to the island's edge, where a ghostly ship materialized out of the mist. It was an eerie sight, its sails tattered and its hull covered in barnacles. Ghostly figures moved about the deck, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "This is the merman's second form," Ilara said. "A ghost ship crewed by the spirits of those who fell victim to his curse. We need to board the ship and find the source of its power," Samuel said. They waded into the water, their weapons at the ready. As they climbed aboard the ship, a sense of dread settled over them. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the deck creaked ominously under their weight. The ghostly crew watched them with hollow eyes, their expressions devoid of emotion. The spectral figures moved with a haunting grace, their eyes locked on Samuel and Jonas. "We need to find the captain," Samuel said, his voice steady. "Stay close and be ready for anything." They made their way to the captain's cabin, the door hanging off its hinges. Inside, they found a spectral figure sitting at a desk, its eyes glowing with an eerie light. "You should not have come here," the spectral captain said, its voice a hollow whisper. "You will join us in death." "We're here to break this curse," Samuel replied, his grip tightening on his cutlass. The spectral captain let out a chilling laugh, its form shifting and flickering. "You cannot defeat us. We are bound to this ship, and we will drag you to your doom." The ghostly crew began to advance, their movements slow and deliberate. Samuel and Jonas fought with all their might, their weapons clashing with the spectral forms. The battle was intense, the air filled with the sounds of steel meeting ghostly flesh. "This isn't working," Jonas shouted, his voice filled with desperation. "We need to find another way." Samuel's eyes fell on a strange, glowing artifact on the captain's desk, a small, ornate box pulsating with an eerie light. "That must be it," Samuel said, pointing to the box. "We need to destroy that artifact." They fought their way towards the captain's desk, the ghostly crew closing in around them. With a final, desperate lunge, Samuel grabbed the box and threw it to the ground, shattering it into pieces. The spectral captain let out a deafening scream, its form flickering and then dissolving into mist. The ghostly crew followed suit, their forms disintegrating into nothingness. "We did it," Jonas said, his voice filled with relief. "But we still have one form left." Ilara led them to a secluded cove, the water calm and still. "The merman's final form awaits you here," she said. "Be prepared for the worst." As they approached the water's edge, the surface began to ripple. A dark shape emerged, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. It was a monstrous, humanoid creature with scales like armor and claws that gleamed in the moonlight. "This is it," Samuel said, his voice steady. "The final battle." The merman let out a deafening roar, its form shifting and changing. It lunged at them with incredible speed, its claws slashing through the air. Samuel and Jonas fought with all their might, their weapons striking with precision and force. The merman's attacks were relentless, its claws and teeth tearing through the air with deadly precision. Samuel and Jonas moved with practiced precision, their movements synchronized as they dodged and countered the beast strikes. "We need to find its weakness," Samuel shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of the battle. Jonas nodded, his eyes scanning the creature for any sign of vulnerability. "There," he shouted, pointing to a glowing spot on the merman's chest. "Aim for the heart." They focused their attacks on the glowing spot, their weapons striking with precision and force. The merman let out a deafening roar, its body convulsing in agony. Despite their efforts, the merman seemed invincible. Its attacks grew more frenzied and desperate, its form shifting and changing with each strike. Samuel and Jonas fought on, their determination unwavering. "We need to keep pushing," Samuel shouted, his voice filled with determination. "We can't let it win." With a final, desperate strike, Samuel drove his cutlass into the glowing spot. The merman let out a deafening scream, its body convulsing and then disintegrating into a cloud of mist. "We did it," Jonas said, his voice filled with relief. We broke the curse. As the mist cleared, the island began to change. The oppressive darkness lifted, and the air grew warmer. The ruins of the ancient civilization seemed less foreboding, and the ghostly figures faded into the background. "We did it," Samuel said, his voice filled with a sense of accomplishment. "We broke the curse." Elara smiled, her form shimmering in the moonlight. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "You have freed us all." Elara's form began to fade, her eyes filled with tears. "I was once a sailor, like you," she said. "The merman took my ship and my crew. But now, I can finally rest." Samuel and Jonas watched as Elara's form dissolved into the night, her spirit finally free. They returned to the mariner's raft, their hearts heavy with the weight of their journey. "We need to get back to the ship," Jonas said, his voice filled with determination. "We have to tell the others what happened." Samuel nodded, his heart heavy. They made their way back to the ship, the night air filled with a sense of finality. When they reached the ship, the crew greeted them with relief and curiosity. Samuel and Jonas recounted their harrowing journey, the battles they had fought, and the curse they had broken. The crew listened in awe and horror, their faces pale with fear. But there was also a sense of relief, they had survived, and the curse was broken. "We need to leave this island," Samuel said, his voice steady. "We have to get back to civilization and tell our tale." As the mariner's raft set sail, the crew couldn't shake the feeling of unease. They had faced unimaginable horrors, and the memory of the merman and Elara haunted their thoughts. Samuel stood at the helm, his eyes scanning the horizon. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the island's curse still lingered in the shadows. "Captain, do you think we'll ever truly be free of this?" Jonas asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. Samuel shook his head, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "I don't know. But we have to keep moving forward. We can't let the past consume us." One night, a violent storm descended upon the ship. The crew scrambled to secure the sails and keep the ship afloat, their hearts pounding with fear. The wind howled, and the waves crashed against the hull with a force that threatened to tear the ship apart. As the storm raged on, Samuel caught a glimpse of something in the water, a dark shape, moving with unnatural speed. His heart raced as he realized what it was. "The merman," he whispered, his eyes wide with fear. The storm seemed to intensify, the wind and waves growing more violent. The crew fought with all their might to keep the ship from capsizing, their faces etched with determination. The merman's form shifted and changed, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. It lunged at the ship, its jaws snapping shut with a deafening crack. The crew fought with all their might, their weapons clashing with the merman's scales. The battle was intense, the air filled with the sounds of steel meeting flesh. The merman's form shifted and changed, its attacks growing more frenzied and desperate. The crew fought on, their determination unwavering. With a final, desperate strike, Samuel drove his cutlass into the merman's eye. The beast let out a deafening roar, its body convulsing in agony. The glow intensified, then exploded in a blinding flash of light. When the light faded, the merman was gone, its form dissolved into the water. The storm began to subside, the wind and waves calming as the night wore on. As the storm passed, the crew of the mariner's raft stood on the deck, their bodies battered and bruised. They had faced unimaginable horrors, but they had triumphed. "We did it," Jonas said, his voice filled with relief. "We broke the curse." Samuel nodded, his heart filled with a sense of accomplishment.